Joy's in Sussex. Joy, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Good morning, James. Well, hi. I'm a former police officer. I joined in the late 80s, black woman from North London, and there is nothing that's been reported so far that is of a surprise to me, because I dealt with it on a daily basis.
Daily basis.
Daily basis. Yeah,
I
was part of that toxic culture where if you're a black woman, you basically have a target on your back from the outset.
Can you remember the first time that you realised that?
I think the first time was when I was in a section house and officers hid in my room after I came from the shower and watched me as I got changed. I joined the Riot Police, the TSG, and my first day I was asked by a white officer whether I had a boyfriend, whether I went out with white men, what sort of underwear I wore, and it continued from that day onwards until my retirement, and I was medically retired because I was diagnosed as work-related PTSD.
Oh, my days. I don't know what to ask you, really. There's so much that you could tell us. Part of me wants to know why you stayed, if that's not an inappropriate question.
It's not an inappropriate question. There was a huge recruitment campaign in Tottenham shortly after the riots. So I, along with other black officers, supposedly joined thinking that we would make a difference.
Yes.
And it wasn't. It was just land to the slaughter. You know, on most of the occasions, I was the only black officer. So, you know, you stood out. So it's almost like you're a novelty.
Yeah.
And that made you even more of a target. So the culture is such that you have new people joining, probationers joining. They very quickly see what the culture is like. They want to be part of the gang. And in order to be part of a gang, you have to find the minority. And that minority was either female, black male. And if you're black female, then there's more
double.
than one target on your back.
It's doubly bad because you're going to get the misogyny and the racism.
Exactly. And then if you're looking for the support system isn't in place, because you can go to your sergeant. The sergeant came from a culture of misogyny, racism. Yes. You can go to your inspector. Well, he, and invariably it was a he, came from that same culture. So
it's torturous. No wonder. I mean, the PTSD kicks in because that is so traumatic. It's everybody's worst nightmare, even in childhood, isn't it? That there's nowhere you can go for help. You reach a place where you think you're going to get help and support, and they turn out to be part of the problem as well. They turn out to be on the side of the baddies, as it were.
Yeah, the gang. They're part of that gang.
What do you feel towards the people that didn't join in but didn't do anything either, if you see what I mean?
Well, they're just as culpable.
That's the clincher, isn't it? That's where we are with this report, perhaps, in that we can't talk about bad apples anymore, because if it's institutional, then even the apples that don't join in are part of creating the institutional problems.
Exactly. You know, if there's one person who has stood up whilst these things were going on, it would have made a difference.
God,
but it never happened.
Be so lonely, Joy.
But it's very isolating because, again, if you're a black female, you're always in the minority. You see, so,
yes,
there were some good guys. I did work with some good guys. But like I said, if there was an incident where somebody just stood up and said, look, stop, it would have made a difference.
Yeah.
But that never happened. You see, there's a lot of weakness. There's a lot of bad people, without question. There's a lot of good people.
Yes.
But those good people became bad because they remained silent.
Because they did nothing.
There's a weakness. Yeah, there's a weakness. And you don't want to be shown as being weak. So in order to hide that, you have to become part of that gang, which means you are either very vocal or very active in your hatred, or you're silent. Well, they're one of the same.
I mean, you really couldn't have been more immersed in this horror show, could you? on a personal level? How did your service end? How long did you last, and how did it end?
Well, I was a police officer for nearly 18 years.
Right.
And like I say, I joined shortly after the Tottenham riots, thinking
yes.
that I'd be one of those people who would make a difference.
Well, that was the message, wasn't it? We need to build up more trust between the police and the black communities, and the best way to do that is to have more black people in uniform.
And you can guarantee they'll be saying the same thing today.
Oh, dear.
Makes no difference.
Well, there's my next question then, really, is how do you feel on a day like today? I sense there's a degree of fatigue. You've been here before, but I don't want to put words into your mouth.
Well, going back to your previous question, why did I retire?
Yes.
Well, I was falsely accused of assaulting a racist officer who had a history, and that was going back to the late 1990s. I have been fighting for justice ever since. I've wanted them to investigate perjury, perverting the course of justice.
So other colleagues supported his version of events, did they?
Yes, they did, yeah. Other TSG officers supported his version of events. And I've even written to the commissioner, the new commissioner. He's aware of what's going on, not received any further responses. I've also written to contacted the hotline. The hotline is basically not fit for purpose because They just simply do not. As soon as you mention that you were a former police officer, and no doubt they Google you, you do not get the call back. So
Why
when
is
they
that,
say you will get a call back, because they, without question, they'll have Googled my name, and then the police, the hotline, police officers, Met police officers, they will not contact you, because once they get the information, it's very difficult for them not to act on the information, because they can't deny that they knew. They can't say, well, we didn't know.
I don't fully follow that. I understand what you're saying, but it just seems so incredible to me that there's not more a consequence in place, that these things aren't followable. I googled you. I think you know that. I think the producer told you. A black PC in the Metropolitan Police was yesterday acquitted of assaulting a senior colleague after a court heard that she had suffered prolonged racist abuse, and that was in 1999. And your name is probably, Joy, not a household name, and yet that's in the Met. Prolonged racist abuse, a false accusation of assault, defending yourself against someone who was speaking to you in the vilest of terms.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other people like me whose names you just don't know.
No.
My name is Joy Hendricks. You should know that, because my experience is similar to other people's experience. You should know who we are,
yes.
And you don't, because we are silent. And we're in the background.
And that's
where they want us to remain.
And that proves the absence of desire to improve, really. It's about keeping the lights out, isn't it? It's about protecting the institution rather than the people on the receiving end of these abuses. It's about reputational rehabilitation and reputational correction. What would you want from what would you want from the new commissioner? You mentioned that you'd got in touch. What would you want from the new commissioner?
I would like the new commissioner to listen to people who have been through the experience. I mean, actually sit down and listen to our stories, our experiences, and then act on our behalf. Because if they act on our behalf, they're acting on everyone else's behalf.
Yes.
But that won't happen, because what the two things that the Met have to their advantage, one is money and the other is time. So this report will come out and there'll be a lot of noise, and then it will go silent, and then they fall into the time bracket. The other thing is that people within the Met, they will take the Met on if they've got the strength and the support, but then they've got money and time. So they can drag out a case and they can stop your pay because they have money coming in left, right and centre, and whereas you, the victim, may not.
Do you think Mark Rowley has any idea what people like you have been through?
Yes, I do. It's a simple answer. Yes, he does know what we've been through. Because people like me, as I've said earlier, I wrote to him.
Yes, I know.
I got a response from not from him directly, from his staff officer. So it's a standard cut and paste. Oh, this is terrible. I'm really sorry that this happened. But leave it to the hotline because we don't want to cross-reference or confuse matters. The hotline doesn't do anything.
What is the hotline?
So you're back to square one.
I should know what the hotline is. The hotline is
the anti-corruption hotline, which is what Rowley rolled out recently.
And you've phoned the anti-corruption hotline and they haven't got back in touch with you?
I've contacted them at least 4 times.
And you haven't
I haven't had a single response.
And are some of the people that you want to talk about still in the service?
That I don't know.
Okay.
That I don't know. But I do understand that a lot of people who have retired have been invited back into the Met because they have such a problem with recruiting. But the problem is when I took the Met to court to employment tribunal, because I was forced to settle the case, those officers, and there were many officers, many officers.
You were forced to settle the case by lack of time and money?
No, because I was basically told if I didn't settle, then I won't get the funding from the Federation.
Right, okay.
So there's a lot of people who want their cases heard, but you have no choice.
Yes, I understand.
So all those officers, the Met accept no liability, so their reputations aren't tarnished. So there's nothing stopping them going back in and rejoining the Met. If you just look at my case alone.
I am looking at your case alone, and I'm looking at a Scotland Yard spokeswoman saying the matter would only be investigated further if PC Hendricks logged a formal complaint.
Yeah, I've been logging formal complaints since then. I've been logging formal complaints in over decades, and I was basically told to stop because it's being repetitive. I'm being repetitive. So apparently I'm a serial complainer, but I'm also repetitive in my complaint. So these officers are protected.
What would success look like for you? What do you want specifically?
Success would be that these racist, sexist, corrupt, misogynistic officers suddenly meet their cellmates. That's what success would look like, because there has to be consequences. These are criminal offences. Criminals should be in jail. Police officers who are criminals avoid jail.